Hello, welcome to South of Left Field. My name's Jimmy, and yes, I do say the same thing every time. Let's just call it my trademark. So I am pulling back away from so many of the things that have been going on in this country today, and I'm going to pivot and go back to where I originally started, which is talking about the condition of politics, the grand game that gave name to this channel, South of Left Field. Now, I want to explain a little bit about what it is that I see and why I believe what I do. We have two predominant political parties. I've said many times they've existed for over 150 years. Between them, they have continually traded back and forth control of the various elements of our government, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. As time has gone on, the game has developed to where everybody worries and sweats and howls at the moon about the presidential election. And practically no attention in the press and all this primary stuff that goes on. The afterthought is the members of the House, and the afterthought is the members of the Senate. And I think this is kind of by design, because what it does is it allows the parties to really push their candidates for the House and the Senate, where a lot more of the power resides than resides in the presidency. I mean, think about this for a moment. Bernie Sanders runs for president, and everybody says, oh, yeah, we wish Bernie would get elected, but if he got elected, he wouldn't be able to do a thing because the House and the Senate wouldn't let him. And they're right. So what does that tell you about where the power resides? Because the thing is, the House and the Senate can pass things that a president doesn't want, and the president can veto it. It's the only option he's got. Or the House and Senate members can refuse to submit the legislation he wants, and there's not a thing he can do about that. And the House and Senate can override the veto if he uses it. So they keep us looking at the wrong thing. We really need to be paying a lot more attention to our representatives, and we need to be paying a lot more attention to our senators. And as we've seen in this pandemic, of course, state government has tremendous power within the borders of the state. And that's a place where, hey, the population there is a lot smaller than it is for the country as a whole. And you count for more, and you and your buds and your pals and people who think like you can have a lot more impact at the state level, as well as the fact that the state decides how the elections are held. I mean, look at Kentucky. They just went from 3,000 polling places to 200. That's a big drop. And some worked, some didn't. Not going to dive into it. So the problem is we've only got two parties. Now, these two parties are funded by corporations. These two parties are funded by wealthy donors. This is where they get their operating budget. This is where they get their money. This is where they have donor lists where the parties can call out to the big dollars and say, hey, we got a candidate that we want you to donate to, and they get the money for their campaigns. They've got the states, that's us, paying for the primaries within their parties. Now, think about this for a moment. The Green Party, which is in left field off by itself, not very big, but it's in a number of states. The Green Party has to pay for their own primary. They don't get to hold voting primaries. The Democrats and the Republicans do, because the Democrats and the Republicans control the state, and they've all made an agreement among each other. Hey, we'll run our primaries. We'll flood the airwaves with the noise of our candidates. We'll take all of the attention away, and these third parties can't run candidates. We're not going to pay for them to have primaries. We're not going to support them. We're only going to support each other. Think about that. Those two parties supposedly fight each other hand in hand, saying, we'll make taxpayer pay for our primaries, but nobody else's. And we'll fill up the airwaves with our messages and our candidates and nobody else's. Do you know the Green Party has a candidate running for president? Do you know who he is? Why don't you know who he is? Yes, I know. He's probably not going to draw a lot of votes, and that's a shame because you know what? If you're looking for a party whose candidates and platforms are dedicated to taking care of the general population instead of catering to the businesses and the extremely wealthy, that's about the only real party that's out there. Anything else you get is funded by the wealthy, is funded by the corporations, and is not going to touch that third rail. They're not going to do anything to rein these people in. Look, since the end of the Second World War, the standard of living of the general American has done little but decline. We are not living as comfortably at all as people did in the 50s and 60s. And the reason is that all the wealth and all the income it takes to build the wealth has been flowing into the upper class. Yes, American productivity is wonderful. Yeah, we do all these great things. We have this wonderful GDP, but the GDP isn't going to the general population because the tax codes are not set up to punish people who want to be multi-billionaires. The tax code is not a barrier to extraordinary wealth, which means the people who acquire this extraordinary wealth acquire it by extracting it from the general population of the country. We have to have a falling standard of living because their wealth is so obscenely large. You know, this whole business about who needs to be in office and who's the greater and lesser of two evils, well, you know what? You're right, there's two evils, and then there's a candidate who's not evil. So why are we fighting and sweating over who's going to vote for the lesser of these two evils that we have? The two evils that are in the news and nobody else has mentioned. The only way, people, the only way we get a voice in our government is if we stop voting for the two evils. I can't tell you how many people like to try to beat me over the head. Oh my God, you've got to vote against bone spurs. Trump. And then they offer me up this dish rag of a candidate whose voting record in history is racist and strikes against the general population of the country. Biden hasn't done a thing for us, ever. Not really. You see, we're not looking at the right hill. So much in life depends on where you're standing when you look at it. I love the little cartoon of the 6 or the 9, depending on which end of the number you're standing on, a person standing on each end of it. One sees a 6, one sees a 9, and they're arguing over what it is. Well, the thing is, that's kind of what the Democratic and the Republican Party does. They've got their issues. They've got issues with abortion. They've got issues with immigration. They've got issues with civil rights. They've got all of these different hills that they get people to fighting over. And they've got they've got us trained to stand on one end or the other of this number on the ground and argue about it. And each person, of course, is telling the truth. They see what they see from the perspective of where they're standing. My perspective here is this perspective I've had for quite some time, and it is this perspective of inequality. Why is American citizens' standard of living falling when we've got billionaires who are raking it in hand over fist like money is chump change, and we got people starving in this country. We've got people living in shelters being attacked by police in this country because they can't afford to live anywhere else. I mean, if you leave it up to the police, they'll drive them out somewhere and let them die in a wilderness. That would suit the police just fine. And that would suit the upper class just fine because it gets them off the streets and out of the way so their businesses can thrive and they can make more money. Folks, I'm going to write in the Green candidate for president. Unfortunately, I don't have a Green Party here in the state I live in, but I can write in people, and I'm going to exercise writing in. And here's the thing. I'm fighting the fight that says I will not be a party of the Republicans and I will not be a party of the Democrats. I will vote. I will have a voice, as small as it may be, that says I support the American people, not the corporations, not the ultra rich. And I'm going to keep this short, so from South of Left Field, thank you for listening. Please share, please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again in a week.